What's up? How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the lab. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz. Tonight, we're going to talk about a very special case that we've covered on this channel for close to 3 years, coming up on the 3-year anniversary. I don't want to turn my camera on just yet, but I'm gonna. And so, hey, how's it going? We have Dr. Gary Brucato, forensic psychologist, in the house. How are you, doctor?
Very well. How are you? Thank you for inviting me on.
I was watching Chris over there on the interview room, and he's they got a great program going on.
Yeah, definitely. He's got Steve Johnson on, right?
Steve Johnson, yeah, very, very smart guy, and Chris is all right too.
Foundation with me and Chris.
Oh, okay. So he's in the yeah, that's right. He does training as well too, doesn't he? He's like he teaches and he's in the Cold Case Foundation, but
I'm not sure. That's a question. He's what he's very, I think where he really excels is he does like a statement analyses, that kind of thing. And he's also, I think, a master interviewer, interrogator, that kind of thing. And so
that's interesting.
We're looking at a cold case together, and there's a suspect. He's a great person to bring in to come up with tips on how law enforcement might interrogate the suspect or what they might make of the person's statement. If it sounds ridiculous, if it sounds plausible, they're showing signs of nervousness, if the story doesn't adhere, etc. So that's where I think he really dazzles. Brilliant guy.
Yeah, no, I was listening, and I've heard him on the show before, and he's they're fantastic. But it's just a really sad case, and tonight we're gonna talk about another case that's awfully sad and something that's been going on, like I said, now for close to 3 years. In June, it will be 3 years. With not a lot of answers, actually almost none, a lot of speculation, a lot of games, a lot of, gotchas and, whatever it is. And it just seems as though the further along we go, at first when things like this happen, you can kind of see land from where you are, like, and I just feel like we're drifting and being able to see the land hasn't happened for some time. Not only that, now there's fog in the way. And I think that if we kind of go back to the beginning, that we can actually sort of harness some of that visual that we've been missing, because like, you know how it goes, Dr. Gary. When something first starts, it transforms over time into where we are now, which is almost nowhere. But it felt like we were closer when we first started, and it really shouldn't feel that way. Does that make any sense at all?
Of course, I understand. And one of the things that we've talked about, whether it was, I think we've confined our discussions of it together with Chris McDonough to the interview room. I don't think we've covered it on the lab, have we? Have we covered that case together here?
Which one?
The case we're going to be covering today. Did we cover it? Sumner Welles. Did we cover it?
We've talked about it a bit, yes, on this show.
Yeah, you have.
But we've talked about it on.
Right. I just don't recall if we did that together here.
Yes, we talked a little bit. We did. You remember the show we did? Now that you mention it, was we were sort of debunking.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was over here. So we did that here.
That's right. You're right about the myths.
Lately, Dr. Gary, we've been doing a lot of. You're in my headphones a lot. You really are.
Sorry.
And I've felt more sane lately too, which is
penance for sins.
Yeah. So, but you're mildly familiar with the case, and I don't know if you have ever seen, and we're gonna listen to an interview that Chris McDonough did with the mother Candice when she was down at the
Yeah.
Horse Pond. Have you heard that one?
Well, I actually, at this point, because I've been on a few shows about this case now, I have a pretty good grasp of it. And I did see a lot of video footage that Chris did. That terrible room that Summer was living in, that I always say looked kind of like an oubliette in a dungeon.
Right.
The mother and Dawn, telling these stories that don't quite make a lot of sense. Chris down by the water with the mother, that kind of thing. I've seen a few of them.
Yeah, but you haven't reacted to
Not
them.
all. Not all. No, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. And I've also seen footage of the parents on Dr. Phil, which, that was interesting. I'm sure you're familiar with that appearance.
Yeah, I remember when they were going to do it, and everybody was they were happy that Dr. Phil was going to cover it. It was nothing against Dr. Phil. I just didn't think I did think that it would turn up anything, because Candice, in my personal opinion, and probably the opinion of anybody with eyes and ears that isn't blinded by hatred of people, that have a different opinion than them, it was a nothing, because I was done with the interview when Dawn. And by the way, Dawn is much more camera savvy, which, I mean, I'm not gonna make any jokes or anything, but he's more camera savvy than Candice. And when he turned to her and said, "They're here, we're trying to help Summer," and she turned and as crying, like, just crying, and says, "Well, it's not helping me." I was just like, you know what? I can't. I don't want to listen to this. It was, and that's how sort of the whole thing went. It was just, it was just something I've never seen a mother quite act like that. Now, I want to give you a little backstory here before, because sometimes I get accused of not giving the backstory, which is fine. Like, I don't care.
And it's helpful because it's entirely possible that I don't have it all. I know a lot of it, but it would be good to walk through it. And there are also going to be audience members that just don't know the story at all.
Right.
So I think
there will be some new people that do.
You're rapidly growing, so
checking in. That's and very thankful, and thank you and Chris for that as well. It's an honor. So, Sumner Welles. Let me read this here. So this is this was from 6/4. This was on the year. This was last year. On June 15th, 2021, Sumner Welles disappeared. This is from TBInewsroom.com. Sumner Welles disappeared, leading to one of the most exhaustive and involved missing child cases we've ever investigated. And I don't think that they said that lightly. You know what I mean? I mean, that's quite a statement. Though we have no new, this is on the 2-year anniversary. Though we have no new details to share, rest assured we're continuing to work with the FBI, Hawkins County Sheriff's Office, to chase every lead, ask every question, and search every place we can to find Summer. We won't stop until we have answers. Summer remains the subject of an ongoing Amber Alert thanks to forensic artists with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We have an age progression, and let me share this really quick. And here's the age progression photo. Now, a lot of people weren't particularly happy with it, and they're like, well, I don't know. Do you know much about age progression?
A little bit, but what was the issue that people had with it?
They say she looks too grown up. That that she would have been instead of 8, or she looks 13, or which I don't know that much about age progression. But
what I think is interesting is that when you see this photo, she really looks a lot like Candice.
A lot. And when she was younger, in younger photos, she seemed to look a lot more like Dawn, but I guess that's how it works. I guess that's how DNA works.
Yeah, but she's
But
got
yes,
the facial structure, the cheekbone. She reminds me more of Candice.
yeah, and like that's just like I said, this is just a age progression photo with not
Right.
that's
She
just what
looks she looks very nourished, and as somebody pointed out in the chat, she looks like too healthy for the way that child
Sure.
likely looked
right.
at the time she went missing.
And so let's see here. The investigation into the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Sumner Welles remains active and ongoing. In order to preserve the integrity of the investigation, we cannot discuss specifics. Now, when I heard that, when you hear little clips like that, you feel that maybe they have something, but they just can't talk about it. I mean,
right.
Or they could have nothing, and that's just what they say. You know, I mean, it's really hard. That's where these vacuums kind of start. You know what I mean? Where there's just not and maybe they just don't have a lot of information. But I do find a lot of the investigation, especially when it comes to the 3 boys who were removed and have not been returned close to 3 years later, that no charges have come of that. I've always found that interesting because it's not happenstance that they take children out of the home, even if one of your children goes missing under unusual or suspicious circumstances, according to Dawn and Candice, who say that she just flat out was taken she was kidnapped right away. They knew right away that she was kidnapped.
So let me just be clear. One of the things that's been murky to me every time I've heard about this case is the extensive patchwork of offenses and abuses related to other family members, or at least accusations thereof that are in the background before one even gets to Summer. And it sort of reminds me of when you're in a courtroom and you can't bring up other cases because it would be too prejudicial, that kind of thing. Because when a jury hears them, it would be too obvious what kind of people you're dealing with or what kind of background they have. But
which I have a complete problem with. But
I'm sure you do. I mean, you're a big fan of that and circumstantial evidence,
love it,
common sense, and all of that. But I think I think it would be good to paint that picture for the audience, because I think going chronologically, it'd be good to talk about what was even in the background before this child was even a twinkle in the parents' eyes.
So when Summer went missing, Dawn's stepsisters, who he grew up with in Utah, contacted the FBI and told them the allegations that were levied against Dawn was that he was inappropriate with specifically one sister who was 5 years old at the time. Sumner Welles just happened to be 5 years old as well, and that sparked something within his stepsister, who was abused, according to her, by Dawn for years. And so it was eventually turned into the police, and he was investigated for 3 different incidents involving inappropriate, assault, sexual assault, and which he admitted to, but he said that he was a minor at the time, and that she, the 5-year-old, was the one that made the advances towards him as a 12-year-old. He didn't know any better, but that it went on for about 7 years or so, something like that. And so, which was all investigated. And when he went to jail during, I can't remember what year it was. I think it was within the first year of the investigation. He went to jail. And
is he an RSO?
Don is not no, he is not registered. His son is, but he's not. And I'm not really that familiar with this. He's an admitted one, but he's not a registered one. If that makes, I don't know if that makes sense.
Is
I
the
call
idea that behavior was isolated to childhood, but when he was a minor, the accusations of was everything?
well, I mean, he was arrested for stealing somebody's panties out of their house,
Mhm.
a stranger, when he was 40 years old.
But any child offenses?
No, he wasn't. No, he actually ended up going to jail or prison not that long after, like, it was when he was, I don't know, 17 or so.
Mhm.
And then I think it was like 17, but then he got out, and according to the sister that he had been inappropriate with, he was 19 when he got out, and she was like 12. And the very first night, he assaulted her again.
Oh, I see. You know, I'll tell you something as a side note. I think your audience will find very interesting. There was a time when, in certain states, as I understand it, they would put on the in the registry minors who had committed these offenses, and you know, like stories like a 14-year-old assaults a 12-year-old, that kind of thing. And the reason they stopped is because older sex offenders would go into the registry to identify children who had engaged in offenses like that against younger children, use the location and try to access those children who had been perpetrators and victimize them. With the logic being that since they had already engaged in certain activities, they might be open to grooming by an older offender. And
Okay.
it's really awful, but all of it is awful. So that you don't see that now. As far as I know, they won't put you on there unless you're older than the adult age in that given state.
Yeah. I mean, that's just wild to think that somebody would go to some sort of registry like that who is,
Oh, yeah.
but it makes sense.
There was an expose of it. I'm almost positive it was in the New York Times that I read that, but there was an expose of it where I think in the state of New York, and they stopped it.
Right. Well, okay. I mean, that makes sense. But yeah, so there has been just an absolute backstory. A lot of the people that are pro Don and Candice, and when I say pro Don and Candice, I want to make this very, very clear, meaning they feel that it's inappropriate to speculate about their guilt or their innocence, like it matters what I say in a court of law. My speculativeness towards them, I don't know what they've done. I just don't believe their story. Okay. And Don and I have had some colorful interactions before that some I regret, some I felt were necessary, and some were just impulsive, but I'd always tried to be I wouldn't even say fair. That's not the word that I'm looking for. But there were people that said that what happened in the past with Don has absolutely no bearing upon what's going on today with the disappearance of his daughter, or anything that Candice may have done in her past has no bearing whatsoever that it had anything to do with Summer going missing. And I just flat out cannot get past. I can't get past the facts of what has been told and what's been admitted by Don. It to me, logic escapes them, and I don't mean that in like a terrible way. I just don't think that we can go around just assuming that every child lived in this happy-go-lucky lifestyle. I mean, we've seen it, we've witnessed it, and so do I think that they're responsible for Summer's disappearance? I think that they know more, and that's how I've always felt. And if that's a hanging offense, then fine. I'm fine with that. Honestly, But I've asked you before, just flat out, is it important? And you've told me yes.
Hmm. You mean the prior history?
Yeah.
Well, of course. I mean, first of all, sometimes when we look at people who commit offenses against children, we find out that they themselves had been abused, that there was a family system in which that was normalized, or they were exposed to that kind of thing, either vicariously or themselves. And then there are other cases where we find out that there were people who early on in life already had aberrant attractions that were paraphilic and outrageous. It's really important to understand that a person doesn't just wake up one day and assault a child.
Right.
You'd have to have a very specific kind of personality and kind of brain to be drawn to that kind of thing. I mean, you have to understand, evolutionarily speaking, there is a reason why people are not attracted to people who don't look like they're capable of having children yet. I mean, there's a reason for that, right? I mean, the whole point being that your brain is supposed to be drawn to somebody that will give you offspring. And the notion of finding the facial structure, body type, and body size of somebody younger than that attractive, it's been speculated for a long time, may actually involve abnormalities of the brain, which is very probable, I think. And then there are other people that have associations because of their own abuse that's normal or whatever. So that there's some people that it comes probably from exposure or their own violence that they've experienced. So there's all kinds of reasons, but I do believe that a portion of the population of people who are attracted to the prepubescent may in fact have abnormal brains. It doesn't mean I have any sympathy, as if it's a disease, because one does have a braking system and
Right.
know to oneself. And then there are also hebephiles, who are people that are attracted to teenagers that are not adults, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, like that. And it's an interesting thing because the literature says that the people interested in the prepubescent tend to like opposite sex victims, and the people that are attracted to teenagers that are not yet adults tend to be attracted to same-sex victims, sort of like we saw with somebody like John Wayne Gacy or Dean Corll, where it was a lot of same-sex victims that were minors. You can make a guess that they were going to be 13, 14, 15, like that, because that's the way it tends to go in the statistics. So already, if you're talking about somebody that would have taken advantage of this child, you would, first of all, you would think it wouldn't be their first rodeo or the only attraction they ever had to someone of that was that age. And the second thing you would think is it's significant that they would be attracted to an opposite sex victim. That tells you something about the age range that, statistically speaking, they're likely drawn to. So you would make a statistical assumption that if this person were going to attack another person, they'd be probably prepubescent.
Yeah. So, and I want to just go back here for a second because I think it is important. A lot of the accusations were answered by Don by saying that they just want my dad's stuff, and part of his will and things like that. My sisters are just trying to cut me out of the will. They don't want me, blah, 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 blah. Right. So as you listen to that, you're like, okay, I mean, stranger things have happened. However, there was another woman, another victim of Don's who came out and told the exact same story as his stepsister. And then there were other people that didn't even want to go on the record about it. They said, yeah, it happened to me, but I'm not filing and I don't want to talk about it openly, and which is their right to do, and very much so respected, because sometimes, just opening those wounds up is just too much, for some people. And
people are scared.
Correct. That too. Yeah, exactly. And I think there was some of that. I think I had heard some of that as well. So, and I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just particularly towards just the stepsisters, although that was his excuse for why they would come out and want to ruin him, and that that they found this opportunity, that there was this fantastic opportunity,
Right.
to slander his name and whatever. I think we got a shout out too from Chris. It looks like they're sending.
Oh, is he going to be coming on in a minute?
I don't know. Let me see here. I mean,
hope he does.
I hope he does too. Let me see here. Oh crap. Okay, that's not what I meant to do.
Well, these dynamics are very interesting and complicated in families where there's at least accusation of abuse. An example of a case where that really has to be taken into consideration is the Madeline Soto case, where you have, you and I have talked about that on our podcast, The Witness Box with Chris.
The Witness Box,
right?
Yes, yes.
And, we did part 1 of listening to that, statement by Stefan Stearns. And, look, the man had a collection of pornographic videos or images of the child on the phone. I mean, this guy is at least in some way guilty, and now is formally accused of murdering her. And then the question is, why is the mother telling stories that don't add up? Is she protecting him? Was she in on it? And again, I think you got to think, maybe she was afraid. We don't know yet, right? Are you complicit? Are you scared? Are you, and this is because the dynamics of households where these things happen are horrifying. Sometimes you're a victim yourself. Sometimes, to not be a victim, you join in on the offenses. Sometimes you love a person so much you turn a blind eye to the horrors of what they're doing. Sometimes you're participating in some of the perversions. We have no idea.
Right.
So, so these families where these things happen are extraordinarily heartbreaking and terrifying. And usually there's this one central kind of psychopathic, awful person in the middle, or at least perverse person in the middle. And then you've got all these kind of characters that are operating in different ways. Some of them are going along to save their skin. Some of them are completely paranoid and going around talking to authorities, telling people the story, and are afraid they're going to get busted for doing so. And then there are these people that have this totally depressed reaction where they say, I can't do anything about this. This guy's too scary. I better just go along with it for my life.
Right.
And, that's the 3 different buckets. Those are the 3 different buckets into which people tend to fall when they're being abused by a despotic person. When you see those buckets forming, you could already start to deduce that, or infer that there's someone in that home that is scaring them.
Right. Well, so, I mean, and yeah, we talked about the Madeline Soto case, and actually Tuesday we'll be recording part 2. Good. Everybody enjoy your Memorial Day. It's a wonderful, it really is a wonderful day. Do you have plans for that, by the way, Dr. Gary?
Well, I did, and then the things got moved around, but I'm a person that's never going to shed a tear over having a day to myself, because I'm doing so much all the time. Right. I use myself too liberally, so every once in a while I need to have a break to do some work. So, but getting back to the Welles case, the picture you're painting suggests that there was already a whole bunch of stuff going on in the family, probably even before Summer was even born.
Yeah, and I want to be careful with the verbiage. I don't think that I'm painting a picture. I think that they've painted the picture, but I'm just reading.
I don't know. I'm just taking the information as.
Oh, I agree. I understand what you're saying, but none of what I said.
Yeah, right. This is not you're not making this up. I mean, these are things people have said, right? In fact, did you even have Dawn's sister on as a guest at one point?
Yeah, Mary Hartman. Yes, very much so. Very much so.
What did you learn there?
Well, I've actually, talking with Mary, I have found her delightful. I have found her honest. I have found that the things that she talked about has backed them up with, reports and things like that. I mean, we can get into the weeds of, she has even said that she was going to adopt Dawn's first set of children because, but that, Dawn wanted money for them, like that she was going to give them like $10,000 to adopt the children. And then somewhere along the line that stopped, or, but the thing is, all the, when you first hear it, you want it to be corroborated. And, a lot of it has been corroborated. And, hold on one second. Somebody said that Chris and Steve are on their way. Hold on.
Oh, I love that. I love working with both of them.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's hang tight until they get here then.
Oh,
But
they're both joining the program.
What both coming over? Yeah, it is. Yeah,
well, then it's perfect to look at the videos together. But between the three of us, I mean, we'll squeeze every drop out of it like an orange. With three bloodhounds like us, I mean, you're being a lot. I love it.
Yeah, I've never done anything. I've watched Steve many times, and I think that he's brilliant.
Of course. Some people poo-poo the whole idea of statement analyses. I saw when you did we did the episode with Chris where Chris was doing a kind of analysis of the gestures and statements that were in the what case was that? The Sebastian Rogers case, which they were also looking at together just now. I think the same footage or similar footage. Yeah. Right. And somebody posted a video where they basically attacked the entire premise of the of the idea of doing that. And they said that it was that it was ridiculous to even contemplate the idea. Oh, look, there's Chris joined.
There he is.
Yeah. So, Chris, we were just talking about how Steve is like a master of statement analysis, and that you had on, and how we were talking about how when you and Josh and I were sort of doing an analysis of the statements in the Sebastian Rogers case, that we took a lot of heat from somebody who made like a hit job video because they basically took a dump on the entire premise that you could even do that. That you could look at a person's gestures and statements and so forth and infer certain things, and among other issues that they had. And I think somebody like Steve has made an art out of doing that. I mean, what you say, Chris? Steve is like a master of statement analysis and interrogation and interviewing. Yeah, one of the best.
Steve's amazing. In fact, he's going to come up. He had to go to the bathroom. And in private chat is his email, Josh. Send him the link. He said,
okay. Now we're talking.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm telling you, the three of us being sicked on those Candice and Dawn videos is going to be very interesting.
How are you tonight, Doc? How are you?
I'm very well. I was sad because I thought I was away, which is why I wasn't on your program. And then it turned out that, I didn't want to steal the thunder from an amazing guest, so I figured do you, and I came on here because but now it works out that I'll be sharing a stage with Steve anyway.
Well, that's
it's so funny. What'd you say, Chris?
Is my mic soft?
Yeah, it's a little low. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. I just had an update, so let me fix that while you guys chat.
Okay. And Josh, somebody just wrote in the chat something like that we need to consider the possibility that they're innocent.
Yeah, I did.
And I think that's
I've already done that. I've moved on.
Well, I think it's important to because this is one of the faults that I had with the person that decided to do a hit job on our last discussion together, is that there was a kind of hypocrisy, because the idea is the whole idea is that what experts should do is look at a variety of hypotheses and then look at the evidence for and against each. But what some people think you should do is that you should take the simplest explanation and not even entertain the more complicated or awful ones, right? So then the criticism would be, well, why don't you just say Sebastian Rogers walked out the door? Well, because it's ridiculous so we should move on to another hypothesis. And it's kind of what we have to do in the Sumner Welles case. I mean, I think when Steve comes on, I mean, you'll have to give him a lot of details on the background too, I think.
He's done a lot. He knows a lot about this.
Oh, you know for a fact he knows this case well?
I mean, I started watching him before I ever met Chris.
Beautiful. Well,
talking about the case, yeah.
Well, yeah. That's excellent, because again, this is a thing where the audience is, the person in the audience is right. We should say it's plausible they're innocent and somebody came, broke in the house and took the kid. It's possible the kid wandered off. It's possible the kid was killed inside the house. It's possible, but we have to look at the evidence for each. And as we've established several times, the hypotheses of somebody coming in and taking her or her wandering off seem rather ridiculous. So then what are you with, right?
I would understand. I understand the fact that, we do definitely have to explore the idea that they're innocent. And I've done that. And I mean, I think that if there was evidence against them today, that they would be in cuffs. So I'll respect that. That is
right.
That speaks towards them, I guess you could say. But I don't know. It's like one of those things when people are acquitted at trial, they're like, they weren't guilty, and I'm like,
It just means there was a reasonable doubt.
Yeah,
but
they were acquitted.
Right,
yeah, they were acquitted.
There was a reasonable doubt in the mind of at least one juror. But
I mean, if they were such good parents, they'd have their other 3 children.
Well, this is why, just as I was saying earlier, and I think Chris would agree, this is why it's considered prejudicial in a courtroom to bring up other things in the person's background, because the truth is you could lose all your children and have a child stolen from you. It's entirely possible. But doesn't it remind you of as I've said with regard to other cases, it reminds me of Oscar Wilde, the playwright Oscar Wilde, who wrote The Importance of Being Earnest, among a lot of wonderful things. And there's a line in there where this character, Lady Bracknell, is interrogating this guy who wants to marry her daughter. And she's being of a highfalutin nature. It's very important to her as a society woman that they know his background and his the parentage. And his parents, he don't know who they are, because he was left in a handbag in a train station. And what happens is that she says, there's this great line. She says, "To lose one parent may be considered unfortunate, but to lose 2 begins to look like carelessness."
Yeah. Right.
Well, it's sort of like that, right? Well, the idea being that at some point it starts to smell when you've lost one after the other, and then so that I agree with you that the overall quality is.
And it goes back. It goes back. I mean,
right.
This is their both of them, their second families. They both were previously married, and they were both previously married and had children with other people, which they had lost those children as well. I want to welcome to the show, and this is my first time meeting, and a big fan, by the way. I'm a very big fan.
Oh.
Steve from Truth to Lies, part of the Cold Case Foundation. Just finished watching your guys' show. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This is a treat, I got to tell you.
Steve, it's a pleasure to meet you. We're on the foundation together, and we met the first time the other day, and I got a little taste of working with you, and it was a pleasure.
Oh, so it was a pleasure for me too. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. And actually, thank you.
We'll get together one day. It'll be dangerous for those around us.
For sure.
Hey, you guys, are you aware of they get these superstars on basketball teams together, and they go, oh, but there's only one basketball. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to try, and it's going to be great. I'll tell you. And I appreciate you guys. Your guys' show, it was so spot on, and thank you so much for talking. We need more professionals talking about it, because there's a bunch of amateurs out there talking about it that don't know what the hell they're talking about. So it's good to hear from people who are entrenched in the life of these kinds of things and have made it their life's goal to help people. So once again, Steve, thank you so much. And Chris, thanks for bringing him over.
Yeah, my pleasure. How's this? Does it sound a little better now?
Yeah.
You sound crisp and fresh.
I don't know what was going on with my mic, but I just in the middle of when somebody said, "Hey, your mic is real muffled," I just got a download of software update. That was the problem. So anyway,
that happens. But you're never supposed to do that. Like with your iPhone, you're never supposed to actually update it because something always goes haywire. And I know, Dr. Gary, there's not a chance in the world you use an iPhone. You're just not the type of guy. And I can profile you from here.
I do not use an iPhone. You are correct.
Yeah, and let me tell you why. Because
I took off the Amish attire, the Mennonite attire that I had on before the program. I set it aside. This is
a functionality. You like the freedom of an Android, correct?
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Maybe I just I like to be different or something. I don't know.
I study the iPhone and Android users very, very. That there's a distinct difference. Not saying one's better than the other. They're just different.
Well, Gary, I'm right there with you, pal.
I was going to say
you the iPhone. No,
I would use a BlackBerry if I could. I like the BlackBerry. I miss it.
I knew it.
They still make it. It's
the old school one where you cramp it.
It's on rocks with a chisel, and you just have to chisel a message and send it out.
It comes with its own carrier pigeon.
I love it. It's hilarious.
Anyway, so what do you two have up your sleeve this evening?
Well, yeah. Funny that you say. Well, so we've been discussing the Sumner Welles case, and I've been giving the backstory. With Mary and Jeannie, and we were just kind of laying that foundation because there's a lot of people that are new to the Sumner Welles case, and as we get, we're just a couple of weeks away from the 3-year anniversary. I expect at the 3-year anniversary that TBI will issue another statement similar to the ones before, saying that they are working on this. I have no reason to doubt that they aren't working on it. It's just some of these cases, are very difficult to solve. And I think the longer that we've gone on in this, Chris, and you would agree, I think that when you don't go back to the beginning, you kind of lose sight of the shoreline, and I think that, your interviews that have gone viral because people care so much about Summer, that there was an infrastructure kind of laid, and Steve was a part of that as well with those very early. You guys were analyzing that stuff very early, and you're pretty familiar, Steve, with this case, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So, so what we were going to do is we were going to listen to, but we can do anything. We can just sit here and talk about the case. We can, whatever you guys want to do. I'm open for.
Well, right when you guys came on, what we were talking about is that because there are people in the chat who feel we have to be more even-handed, and be open to all the different possibilities in the case. And what we have talked about previously and what we're talking about tonight is that if you were to create, a series of buckets of possibilities of what went on here, logic kind of herds you toward the likelihood that this was some kind of inside job in terms of what happened to this child, because the other possibilities they're just too difficult to buy. And we've walked through meticulously why that is. I don't know what your own sense of things is, Steve, but coming from the premise that there's something very fishy about what probably went on in that house, the statements become extremely interesting, and that's why I'm extremely intrigued to hear what you think of them. There's something to be said, for statements when people make them. There's a kind of architecture to them, and you could pick at them, and the choice of language and the way people move their body and their face and the what they reveal about their emotions, their affect, so forth is fascinating. And I think, Steve, have you also, not to put you on the spot here, but have you also arrived at the conclusion that the parents cannot be taken out of the circle that's potentially involved?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
They're
I
not
would
only
imagine
cannot be taken out. That's
Right.
I would focus on the parents.
Right. Exactly, which has been our conclusion also. And I mean, I don't know, Chris, if you want to give the potentially new people here a walkthrough of why the abduction theory just doesn't seem to hold water for those of us who spend a lot of time dealing with these kinds of things. Do you
Yeah, Chris has been there.
yeah, Chris has been there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or should we focus more on the statements by the parents?
Well, I'll just kind of give a high level run here.
Mhm.
So the first thing that every investigator, whenever a child goes missing, the first thing they have to do is when the first patrol guy goes on scene, they have to establish very quickly, because you have a 3-hour window. If there is suspicious behavior in any way, shape, or form in the environment, the totality of the circumstances, or the situation. So there are 3 buckets that a patrol officer has to look at real quick. And within those 3 buckets, you have to determine, based on what you're hearing, what you're seeing, who was the last person that saw the victim. And in this case, the 3 hours becomes rapid because of a 5-year-old. So the time it took for the report to come in to the first officer on the scene, there could already be an hour lost from parents searching or people searching for that 5-year-old. So now you're working in a window of 2 hours. And the reason for that, the 3 hours, is because from a criminal behavioral analysis aspect, a perpetrator who would take a 5-year-old, the typical motivation, and you can talk about this in a little bit, Doc, the typical motivation is sexual in nature.
Mhm.
They are abducting children statistically to molest them. And if they've gone all that way to take a child off of a mountain, there's a high probability you have 3 hours to find that baby, or that baby's deceased. Okay. So in this case, the dynamics here change because you now have a child allegedly in a basement by herself with one point of entry for a potential perpetrator. So if an officer gets there, the universe would 100% have to be on schedule. The offender would have to know that the child's in the basement because their risk level goes so high going up that property to find that child that it becomes almost, you've got to ask, the child has to be transported, it has to be taken out of that home, and then they have to be taken out of their area. So the risk to the suspect is as high as the risk to the child. So statistically and common sense will tell you most suspects won't take that risk. Okay. They will go on and look for another victim in their victimology. So what we do is we create, or you measure it against what they call the victim risk continuum. And we've discussed this 1,000 times, where it's environment, situation, circumstance on one left side, and then on the bottom, medium, low, high. Okay? Meaning, is this a low risk environment, high risk environment, medium risk environment? All right. The lower the risk, i.e. a 5-year-old in her own house, okay, that tells us that child had to have been, there's somebody in her environment that came across her, okay, and that it took the risk. Or It's a family member, a relative, a neighbor, a handyman. And if we use Elizabeth Smart as a perfect example, her sister, her little sister said, I've seen this person before. And they waited for months and months and months. And then she had a aha moment. She goes, I remember who it was. It was the handyman. And lo and behold, it ended up being that guy who had come over to their house in a previous occasion and had done some work for the Smart family. So in this situation, a 5-year-old just doesn't vanish out the back door of their house. It evident of the fact that there's no other case like it. Okay? It doesn't happen. Somebody else tell me another 5-year-old that vanished in the United States. Gary, you keep 119 years worth of data on mass shooters, but there is no other Sumner Welles case in this nation other than the Lindbergh baby.
Well, the Lindbergh baby didn't stroll out. Somebody took a ladder and went up to the
That's
window.
That's the closest analogy. Okay, I would submit. So
I think John Douglas wrote, if I remember correctly, he thought that the perpetrator put the Lindbergh baby in some kind of duffel bag, and then when attempting to lower the baby clocked its head on a part of the building and was already deceased by the time the ransom note came, was just sort of hurled into the forest that way. But he had the idea that in the attempt to take the child out, it died. But Chris, it's interesting because that I have coined this construct of elimination murder. That's what I call it in the literature. And in some of these domestic situations, the idea is to eliminate the child because they're a witness to some abuse that's going on, or they're an impediment to a windfall or a romance or something like that. And then, of course, there are emotional reasons why domestic things happen. If there's sexual abuse of a child going on and the child dies, it's either because they're a witness or there's been excessive force applied in the abuse. It's generally statistically uncommon that the child dies because it's part of the thrill. Usually that's something that happens with serial killers that are progressing, but you wouldn't typically kill your own child for that reason. So that start thinking about the different motivational reasons for doing this. And, it seems to me most likely that there was something that made it necessary to eliminate the child because she was, knew too much or was a witness, maybe was going to cause trouble. There are other kids that were on the line with the law. Who knows? But there had to be some motive like that. And maybe, Steve, I wonder what you think about that, about the possibility that there was some motive to want the child out of the way.
Yeah, I do. I think it's sometimes we say, I think I heard you say this, Chris, and I've said it many times when we're looking at these cases, like I've interviewed this person before, meaning it's the more of the same. This is the same type of profile we get from this type of person. And I've seen this type of thing before in other cases. There's a case here in the Arizona, in the Tucson area that it's old. It was a cold case for a while, missing little girl, and and what it's looking like as that investigation has continued is that she was being abused and essayed and getting to that stage, getting to the point where she was starting to say something. She was writing on the walls and doing different things, and you can't have that. So I think she was eliminated that way. And so I think that it might be something along those lines. I think there was, I don't think that this was just, in the Sumner Welles case, I don't think it was just an accident. I mean, it's certainly possible. I can't take that off the table, but I think more than that, that there was probably some kind of motivation to do it. More times than not, in my experience, it's centered around some type of abuse that is the child now has got to the point where they are going to talk or have started to say something or ask questions or something that now it's not manageable or it might not be manageable. So
Well,
I think that's a
I couldn't agree with
possibility.
you more. This is what we've concluded independently. I'm so happy to hear this, and I'll tell you from having studied a lot of these elimination murders where you're getting rid of a witness in the household. Statistically speaking, I have found that you generally cover it up with a story that there was an outsider who came into the picture and did it. And you usually do it in a very unsophisticated way because you're not a skilled criminal. So, we could talk about elimination murders. I mean, ranging from what I think went on in the Lizzie Borden house, for example, where I believe staged an intruder coming in, all the way to these kinds of cases where, but Chris, did you arrive at the same conclusion that the most likely supposition is that the child was a witness to things that would have led for a lot of trouble and had to be eliminated, and then there was a ridiculous cover story created about an intruder?
Yeah, I mean, I think we came early on, and to your point, Doc and Steve, and Josh, I think everybody came to the conclusion, even at CCF, that there's only there's only three possibilities: an accident, i.e., something happened in the house, and now they have to play. We got to cover this up. 2, she walked out, but that's a high improbability. That's at the number 3 level, in my opinion. So 2 would be the accident, and number 1, it would have to be problematic because of the past behavior that the father had engaged in. And that's why it was so important, and it's still important, to never take that off of the plate in a criminal investigation, in this investigation for this child, because that that in of itself is very problematic. And I just saw that Mary was in the chat. Hi, Mary. The fact that she is a victim of this individual and her sister, that can't be taken off of the plate towards Summer. And the fact that they engaged with the authorities early on by telling them, hey, we need to tell you this happened to me when I was 5 and the same guy's involved in it. I mean, what are the odds of that? And the fact that this 5-year-old disappears, and now here we are almost 3 years later talking about it still. And they're out driving around the country, just saying.
Yeah. I mean, and to your point, Dr. Gary, when this first started, Summer went missing. I had always thought that the parents had known something more. I was never quite sold on the idea that that they eliminated her. I thought, and still sort of teeter, like Steve was saying, that you can't take off the table that there was possibly an accident and cover up. And I know for a fact that TBI had talked to Don and Candice about that scenario, because Don told me himself. So, okay, I won't say that I know it for a fact because Don could be lying, but I mean, he did say that they said, this does happen. And he said, well, that's not us. That's not what happened. But then these factors start coming in that, well, school was starting soon, her very first year. She could be, communicating better. She could be exposed more to the outside world, like the boys were. I mean, they went to school. I don't know how often they went to school, but they were enrolled in school and they went to school. And so as time kind of went on, it was that did always hang in my head about her starting school. What if you go back and you listen to what was going on with the sisters when they were younger, could this play into it? And I mean, the simple answer is Yes, but I have no proof of that. What?
Well, can I say something, Josh, on that? To your
Sure.
point, I mean, let's all be right. I mean, we're all professionals here. We've been around the block a couple of weekends. This little girl is still missing. She has vanished from the earth. Where are the parents? Let's just stop, meaning in our minds for a second, right? Where is mom and dad? The mother that cradled this baby as a infant, who gave birth to this infant. Where are they? John Walsh started a movement, a TV show. I want on Adam, Adam Walsh. Why has this ended for them? Why is it ended?
Because you're right, Chris. There's nothing going on with them.
She's gone. That's what they're, oh, well. And guess what? I've yet in my career met another family that had 2 people evaporate, a child and an older sibling from Candice, her sister, who just evaporated. Okay. Now, we can have all the theories in the world of, well, she was trafficked, she's been sold, she's been given, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we get it. Where are the parents? Where are the parents? I can tell you what Josh, what they're doing.
Yeah, I do.
And they're not looking for Summer.
No, they're not. And a lot of that, and we've asked them about it. The Cold Case Foundation had offered to help them or take a look at the case or some sort of advocacy, which was all denied. And well, I don't trust this and I don't trust that. And it's funny because people will say things like, oh, how could this get any worse? The child's gone. She's been gone for 3 years. It's as bad as it can be. It doesn't get any worse. I mean, she's gone. And so me speculating, you speculating, and I'll give a shout out to the, I believe it's Deception. Let me see here.
Detective.
Yeah. The Deception Detective. He did an analysis on the conversation that Don and I had. And thank you so much for that. And I'm sure Chris appreciates your kind words as well. No matter what I say or what I speculate, has no bearing on what actually happened. I'm not changing anything. What's happened has happened, right? Like I can speculate. And so what's worse? Us sitting here speculating, trying to figure out what could possibly be it, or the child being missing for 3 years and the parents doing absolutely nothing about it. Steve, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. As you're saying, here we are 3 years later, the parents aren't doing anything to find Summer. Well, that is just the pattern from day one. They weren't doing anything from day one to find Summer. All they were doing was posturing on social media to protect themselves. They were in that self-preservation mode from the very beginning, and the effort to find Summer was not there. It was not in Candice's language. We just talked about this on the last show, is that there was actually I use this in some of my classes once in a while, when Chris's clip, when he was there and he's interviewing Candice down in the basement, and Candice walked him outside and she's walking him through the day of what happened that day that Summer went missing, and Candice is trying to describe how she went outside out the dungeon door to the outside to look for Summer, but her language was otherwise. So she said she opened that door and she came out there, and then she had to give a reason why she came out there, which is makes it very sensitive. In other words, it's not enough to just say, I came out here to look for, and I looked and I yelled for her. No, I came out here, and here's why I came out here, because sometimes she'll come out here and she'll just sit right here and play. And so she qualifies her action with a reason why she had to come out there. And then she said, and I came out and I said, Summer. Now, if this was experiential and her daughter was actually missing, she wouldn't come out there and say Summer and look down as if Summer's sitting right there. That's what she did. She would come outside because Summer's missing, and she would say, I went outside and I yelled for Summer. Summer, where are you? And she would be yelling for her, but that wasn't in her language. And so it just, she told us right there, and it was a great interview that Chris did with her, and I'm so glad you did it, because it's one of those things that it adds to there's a huge stack of stuff of indicators that we stack together that makes me lean towards it's the parents. We don't have to look any further than the parents. Candice's explanation to Chris was not experiential. It was not experiential language. And so from day one, they weren't looking for her. If they had, it'd be in her language. She could tell us clearly how she did it, what she did. And same with Don Welles, but it's not there. What we have is posturing, self-preservation, self-protection, and in language that is not experiential.
And, for the people that are listening, these are the guys that show up and investigate missing people, missing children. Okay. So for anybody to say, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They've done this hundreds, if not thousands of times. And this is how that I would assume majority of law enforcement or investigators would feel about this situation. And you can even tell from the sheriff's department, and I know that people are very critical of them, right or wrong. You're allowed to do whatever you want and feel how you want to feel. They're also questioning Don and Candice to this day. They still have them as suspects by the language of Ronnie Lawson saying everybody in Summer's case or everybody involved is a suspect. Now, that wasn't some crazy, everybody in the United States is a suspect. That means the people that were directly in her life and responsible for her are suspects in the disappearance of Sumner Welles. And for people that don't think that that's the case, you got to clean the wax out of your ears, because he couldn't have stated it any clearer. They are suspects. And I will argue with you every day and show you that clip where he says very clearly. He also goes on to say that they're not cooperating in the case. What innocent parents that have nothing to do with their daughter going missing or child going missing? That is a damning statement. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Gary?
I mean, it's very difficult to understand a reality in which that could happen for a different reason. I mean, the part of the problem I have with it, and I mean, unless they're totally traumatized, their affect doesn't match what it is you would expect. I mean, I think you'd agree, Steve, the affect and the emotional reactivity isn't there either. They don't look like people that are grieving or shocked or horrified. And as we've talked about many times, I mean, I don't know, about your own life, Steve, but the three of us have talked openly about, we've all had experiences of grief, and we know what grief looks like. And it's like Emily Dickinson, I measure every grief I meet, right? In other words, you compare it to your own. And I'm not really sure if I can dismiss the mismatch there. They talk about it like they're talking about the weather. Mm-hmm. And Chris, hasn't that struck you as strange how cold they are when they talk about their missing child? I've never seen a tear. Have you?
I can only tell you that I saw when Candice was polluted one night, plastered, drunk. She made a comment that is still with me, where she goes, "I wish I could tell them," or something to that effect. Remember that one, Josh and
Yes,
Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, where she's so drunk, and it's like the liquid courage is loosening up what the truth is behind the, the facade there for a moment.
Very interesting.
And she says, "I wish I could tell them," or something to that effect. Josh, do you remember what that verbiage was? Anybody remember?
It was something very similar to that, and she kind of, also made a reference that she felt like God was punishing her.
Well,
for something,
and that's the other. Yeah, that's the other one. When I had her, when she was at the water hole, and I don't know if you have that video that you could tee up.
Yeah, I sure do.
And Steve and Gary, you guys will understand where I'm going here. He was this close to copping out and telling me what the truth was, in my opinion. And we've done this couple of weekends, all of us. Okay. And doggone it, if it wasn't this search and rescue equestrian group or whatever it was, I had no idea they were going to be there that day. And everything, she literally had this emotional breakdown where she fell to the ground for a second. She literally fell to the ground. And I knelt down and I said, what's going on here? And she composed herself, stood up for a second, wanted a cigarette. And then she kind of leaned down and looked down. And she was basically, "I think God is punishing me." And out of respect for that, because I thought she was going to tell me the truth, and I did not want that on YouTube. Okay. Because I was going to turn it over. I was going to give it to the authorities. And so I told Karen, because she was filming, turn off the camera. I looked over and turn the camera off. And next thing you know it, they show up. And it was like she snapped right out of it and came right back to, what I think, Josh, if you want to show it, maybe everybody can see it.
Sure. Yep. You want me to just forward to that part?
It's up to you. Yeah. I mean,
while you're pulling it up, Steve, did you also find the affect odd? The emotional tone peculiar? In your experience as somebody who looks at statements, do you often find that there's that kind of mismatch between the emotionality and the
Yeah, I want to see congruency between the words and the emotion, and there can't be a disconnect. It's got to be congruent, and if not, something is off, because we compare it to de facto parents that are telling the truth, de facto innocent parents. And you will see that there is congruency between what they say and their emotions and the effects. And and in the Sumner Welles case, it wasn't there. It was was it you, Josh, that said it? It was just like, it was like another day, or maybe you, Gary, you said it. I don't know, but
like the weather, talking about the weather.
Talking about the weather. There it is. So yeah, it was just kind of like that. And it's to me, when I hear that, I'm thinking, wow, this is something that was rehearsed, and they're going through the script, and this is what we're going to talk about now, and it's just part of the script.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was definitely a disconnect there.
Yeah. Where I've seen that is with people that are giving a statement in a language that isn't their first. And then what happens is that when they get very heated and emotional, they slip into the first language. It's almost as if, and I know there's a whole hypothesis about it, that language is encoded alongside affect when we're little kids. But when you learn a language later, they're separated, so that speaking in a language that isn't your own isn't as effectively charged. I mean, I know for example, I grew up in a household where people spoke Italian often, and believe me, if somebody cuts me off, they're getting yelled at in Italian. It slips out of my, in the car. I mean, they're getting every, with the hands waving and the whole thing. And another sign, by the way, of emotional activation, the gesturing, and I think it is interesting, that little intellectual kind of wall there is, with people that are faking emotionality. In fact, it's something that you talk to, for example, to actors that are trying to come across as realistic, right? You tell them, use words and memories. They're going to bring you back to your earliest days, to your childhood, and then, contemplate that and let the tears roll naturally, that kind of thing. So, but it is interesting to me. But I mean, don't you think, Steve, that there's that little, there's a little wall there that indicates that this is not tied to authentic affect. it's
Yes.
rehearsal.
Yeah, I do think that. And I love that analogy that you just gave about the second language. I think that is a perfect analogy. It's when they get frustrated and it's going to go back to what's comfortable because it's coming off very quickly and emotion charged. And so what happens when you feel the emotion? When you feel sincere emotion and stress, then your brain kind of shuts down. So you revert back to what is familiar, what you don't, and you can do instinctually. And people that are rehearsing a script type narrative can't do that. You just can't do it because it's stressful. And so they have to stay on point. And it's like bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Because of the stress, they can't act normal like normal people do feel when they're stressed. Their little child is missing, and so that's where the disconnect comes in because the brain has literally just kind of shut down. They're feeling stressed. They got to talk to the camera. They got to talk to the news person. They got to talk to the cops, whoever it is, even if it's on a YouTube show and they're talking about it. Deception is stressful. And so it will come off without that emotion. It'll be void of it, and they'll be void of details, sensory details, and other than what they actually experienced. And they'll often align themselves in some form or another with something that they experienced, but it won't be the complete thing. It'll just be a little snippet.
Well, so, I think Chris got into what was behind the wall with the little alcohol involved. It sounds like you started getting a little bit of the truth there, and that leads me to believe it. And I'd love, Steve and Chris, for you to tell me what you think from your perspective. But it seems to me then that a good strategy here might be to try to separate these two, and appeal to the fact that she feels perhaps that she's got to keep a secret that's a burden, and appeal to the guilt that she obviously feels, because it seems that that she might be frightened of this guy or something like that. You got to get these two apart. What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, yeah, that's a great point. And that's in this interview, they're not together. And she, that day, you guys know my style. I mean, you've seen me in Behind the Curtain with other cases. And I think it's always important, maybe sometimes, for the audience to remember. I mean, I'm still working. I still work murders.
True.
Am I right or wrong? Right.
Oh.
I mean, yeah. So it's not like I love it when everybody's like, oh, this guy's retired and all this other stuff. No, I'm still working murder. I'm sorry to break it to you, but I'm not, in a convalescent hospital somewhere.
He's real tired, not retired.
Yeah, well, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed either. But that said, this day, she's not intoxicated, and I literally wanted to hear the story because I didn't know, and I still don't know. I do know a lot more today than I did that day. I think Candice here wanted to tell the truth, to your point, Gary. She wanted to say, okay, this is what happened. Okay. And she kind of goes through it where when she first gets there, if you remember in this, when she's walking to the water, she goes, everything slows down. Everything slows down. So to me, that was a signal of, and Steve and Gary, keep me honest here. That was a signal of, okay, there's some trauma here. There's something that has happened. She's in this tunnel vision mode. You know, she's walking down that alley and she's going to remember these events. Okay. Then she's going to recall these events, right? How many times have we heard that when you're about ready to get a confession from somebody, you know, they lean over and they say, you know, they finally get to the point where they go, okay, I just can't do this anymore. I gotta get this out. I gotta tell you what happened. Okay. And when she said that, I indicated to Karen behind me, I put my hand out like, you know, hey, stay back, because she's about ready to go here. And as we got down there, and this is the point here where non-judgmental, I just wanted to hear whatever the truth is. And I think that's also an important point that Steve made earlier. You know, in Homicide 101, you don't investigate people. You investigate information. And that information will lead you to that person who could have done the event, whatever it is. It could have been an accident. It could have been, you know, intentional. All of those details come with being sincere, being honest, and being approachable. And I think Candice felt comfortable with me because I told her up front, look, I'm here to help you. I really want to help find Summer. If this is an abduction, I wanted to know that. I wanted to walk away and believe that was the case, 100%. Okay? But I had to go through this process to get there and watch how she react. Sorry, Josh, I do.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Hunter relates that he mentioned to you that
never happened perfect.
There it is. Back it up.
All
There.
this problem.
There it is.
How would we know how to connect that dot? You and me. Well, like, for instance, that Dobbs guy that was supposed to be camping across at my neighbor's house.
Right.
He was there that same time. And then Tony Hammonds, whoever the hell he is, he was down through there.
Who was there when you got home?
There was nobody there. There was my mom mentioned the blue van across at my neighbor's house, but I just figured she had company.
Okay.
I didn't know about that was the guy that was trying to move in there. I didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
And so I didn't think nothing. I just figured it was neighbors. I had visitors.
Okay.
You know, I didn't think nothing about that. I gotta stop. I can't do no more. I gotta have a cigarette. Sorry.
No, good. Light it up.
I just don't.
Light it up,
no,
girl.
I don't want to breathe in.
No. Go blow it. Go. I'm not gonna. Don't worry about me. You should see me drive. I'm a mess when I drive.
Can't drive like that.
By the way, that's true. Whenever I'm talking to Chris, he always misses his exit every time.
And so this is the point here, and you guys and Doc, you can see it. She's starting to go. She got to that point, and Steve, you pointed this out a long time ago. She got to the point where she hit the wall, and she's like, I can't do this anymore for a moment. I got to have a cigarette. So she's looking for a vent. But what we don't see here in a couple of minutes is she literally has a breakdown and she starts crying, and she walks away from me a little bit. And that's when I told Karen, let's not do this on her and in totality. And so I spliced this is what I did.
Right.
And I cut this and I spliced it like I did with the first Hunter interview. I didn't put the whole thing on YouTube, right? There were investigative clues in there that I wanted only the investigators to have. And by the way, everybody knows I turned this over. Some people don't believe me, whatever. I gave this to TBI. They've had it for from day one. But in this point right here, she is, I think, processing guilt.
Well,
You got a lot going on, Candice. I respect you. I'm sorry that you're having all this problem. And no matter what we say, you or me, somebody's going to question
Like,
it.
it doesn't matter what I say or do or try to prove to people. Somebody's always going to twist my stuff.
Right.
She's
And for that
crying.
one woman to go on there that works with
yeah,
Allie,
interesting.
she don't know me and my kids. She don't know what they do every day. Most of my boys were here. They tell you. This is,
I've seen a lot of your pictures.
yeah.
The boys have been taken by this time, correct?
Right.
That speaks volumes. You know what I mean? That speaks a lot. That says a lot. Nobody's perfect, though, right?
No, I'm not perfect.
I'm not
Hell
perfect
no.
by any means, shape, or thought,
Never have been perfect. Never meant to try to be perfect.
and me neither. I mean, you.
I am a person just like you.
Yep.
Or your wife.
That's
or
right.
That person out there on that jet ski.
That's right.
I'm no different than anybody else.
We all make mistakes. There's no question about that.
Hey, Josh, before we get too far on that,
Please.
back just a little bit. Remember what I don't remember the exact words, but it was something to the effect of, no matter what I say to others to prove, she used that prove word. We used this just in the last show. We were talking about the Sebastian Rogers case, Chris and I, and that word came up there. And I gave an analogy of another case I worked where my victim said he had cuts and staples to prove that he was stabbed. And like, how interesting is that? And the thing is that when people have to prove something, it's generally an indication that they don't have the wall of truth standing behind them. Because if you have the wall of truth standing behind you, it's immovable. It doesn't matter what other people say. You know what the truth is. And it's kind of like we just heard Chris say, hey, for those of you who don't believe it, I turned this tape over to TBI. So, I mean, if you don't believe it, whatever. I don't care, because Chris knows it's the truth. And it is the truth.
Right.
And so it's like, whatever, and you move on. But I never heard Chris say, I can prove it to you. I don't hear that language. But we hear this in Candice's language, that no matter what I say to prove it, she has something to prove. It's an indication that not everything that she's portrayed or said is the truth. She's got something to prove. And so again, another notch in that.
Dawn has said similar statements. What do I have to do to prove to you? He even to me, when we've had private conversation, he's like, why are you doing this to me? Things along those lines. I said, doing what? And he's like, this. I said, well, I don't think that I'm doing it to you. I think it's been done elsewhere. Like, it's not, this, you're right. This proving, I can prove to you. And I heard you guys on the other show where, Chris Proudfoot says, well, I can promise you that he's loved, or promise you that he's taken care of, or whatever. Nobody's asking for that. They just want, we're asking, where is he? I mean, I don't know. Are you asking if he was loved, Chris? Were you asking that? Would you ask that?
No, and the other point, to your point, Josh, you just jogged my memory. Remember, Don said there's no proof.
He did say that. Yes.
Interesting.
There's no evidence. How can you prove it? Right? He said that many times. But
just one thing I'll mention is that the shrink in me found interesting is that I think part of the reason you might be seeing a wearing down and possibly, leaking out a little bit of truth, is that you have to remember, Chris, that in standing there and being empathic and warm, you're being everything that somebody like Dawn isn't. And God knows what he's like in private, and God knows what kind of father she had. But the idea is that by being that kind of dude, you suddenly become somebody that it's much safer to kind of let the wall down around. It would have been very interesting, for example, to see what would have happened if there had been a female interviewer. But my guess is that male figures figure heavily into this person's psyche. And I just kind of think that there was something about the way that you approached the conversation that was very equalizing and humanizing, and basically saying, my crap stinks too, that kind of thing. I'm human too. And it seemed to work. That the guard got down, and you started to see a lot of those long pauses and things that were more suggestive of hitting pay dirt in terms of emotion. And I've used techniques like that in interviewing. I think it's very important to use yourself that way sometimes. Just be human.
Well, that's just who I am, right, Gary? I mean, you know me. I mean, my boss used to say, "Why in the world do they confess to you, McDonough?" I would tell him, "I don't know. I like people. I do. I genuinely love people."
Well, because you seem like you would understand and you wouldn't be judgmental. And so I have this quality too, Chris. That's why I can't get on a bus or a train without somebody turning to me and saying, let me tell you the story of my life. I could build the HMO for half of these conversations on public transit or half the dates I go on.
Yeah, I don't get those. Usually I get the trench coat after that. Whoa, wait a minute. Hey, Popo, we got a problem here.
You get that
anyway,
a lot.
I didn't mean to digress, but
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
do people overshare? Do people overshare with you?
With
yeah.
Steve?
Yeah.
All the time.
He's kind.
Well, when I see this interview, the way that, and by the way, let's be brutally honest here, because people are saying, well, she did an interview with Chris. She didn't want to do this interview. She got cornered into doing it by her good friend Robin from the church. She was doing everything she could to avoid talking to Chris, and Robin made it very clear that she should not do that she should talk to Chris, because Chris was sent by the Cold Case Foundation to see if they could help, and Candice avoided it. And now that this conversation's going on and Robin is in the background, just standing off to the side there, they see, and she has this kind of inflated personality where she's very attentive and overly kind and explain. Candice isn't that nice of a person. I mean, trust me, I've been on the phone and I've heard her talking to other people. She's got an explosive temper at times. Now, does that mean that she's guilty of anything? No. But I'm telling you that this is not the Candice that the Candice that you're seeing here is the Candice that's on her best behavior, because her church leader is just right around the corner listening. And Dawn, somehow, some way, who was in town, managed to skirt around and not show up, even though she said that her and Dawn were both coming, correct?
Yep.
All right. There you go.
No question about it.
I can't even enjoy life without my kids.
Help me understand what you mean by that.
Like how these guys are out here having fun with their family and stuff. I can't even go in that water and pretend to even have fun, because what's the point? She's not here to enjoy it with.
I lost a son.
Yeah, you were saying that.
I know that hole. I know there's a depth of pain that nobody understands until you have been in that hole. Okay? And
I've been in this hole twice now.
Help me understand that.
Well, once when my mom called me and said that they couldn't find my little sister Rosie.
Okay.
When she disappeared. And that was heartbreaking. But my daughter, that's twice as worse.
Right.
You might as well just rip my chest out, throw it out there for the fish to eat, because it's worthless without her.
She's
I'm trying to be
crying.
strong for my boys.
Steve, do you think she's having an
Try to-
authentic memory of Rosie being missing that she's drawing on in this moment?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that she. Oh, that's a good question.
Like a
I mean,
method acting technique, you know?
yeah, I don't know that she's really acting there.
That's what I want to know. Yeah.
I think that she's really feeling some pain.
Yeah.
I think she may be remembering the Rosie thing, and
Mhm.
she's definitely correlating that to Summer's disappearance. And so if you go down that rabbit hole, what's the common theme between the two? And I have to put, I shouldn't say theme, but there's a commonality between the two, which includes Dawn. And so I think I don't think that's acting there. I think that she's feeling the emotion, and I think in her mind is definitely connected in some way. And so
That's interesting. I mean, it was the first time when she's speaking that I feel, that kind of empathic reaction where, you get that kind of that sense that this is a true story and I can relate to it and it hurts to hear it. Did you guys feel that way too? When you're listening to this, it pulls on your heartstrings a little bit. So there's something going on there.
She was in the moment. There was no question in my mind standing there and looking at the totality of her reaction, because she's crying right now, and it caused me to think, okay, she's going to go over the edge here. It's going to come. It's going to show up. And that's why I was more concerned with, giving her a little dignity, hypothetically, right? I didn't, what do we call it, Steve, right? Going for the snot.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Just when they're about ready to tell you, why they stuck the axe in their grandmother's forehead, this is the type of reaction that you get. It felt genuine. It looked genuine. And I think she felt trusted. She felt like, okay, if I say this, it's going to get it. It's coming. I'm going to get it off my chest. Okay. Here it shows up. Now, it could have gone 1,000 different directions, in my opinion. It could have involved, others in her family or whatever the story was going to be. But it wasn't the story of a 5-year-old little girl evaporating from the basement. That was not going to be the story here. I'll go dimes to donuts on that one, for quite some time. There was a deep emotional level here, and it could have been tied into, Rose, because she brought it up. She brought up Rosie. But then she ties it into Summer simultaneously. So she's evoking emotion. One of them's kind of distance because she gets notified that Rose is gone. But here it's first person. She's talking about her daughter. And listen how she responds even deeper here. I think you'll find it interesting, Doc. Steve.
I have hope.
Josh.
I feel like everybody is against me.
It's all right. You want to rest for a minute? You want to take a break for a second? Yeah.
It's the most emotion and the rawest. I've watched almost every interview that Candice has done. It's the most raw emotion, the most sincere emotion that I've ever seen. And I don't know if we'll ever see it again, to be honest with you.
Take your time. Nobody else is sure. They're all gone.
Well, that's when she turned around and she saw,
the world today.
Is that when she when she saw the whatever search team.
All the
or-
searchers, Gary and Steve, as you remember, Steve, all these searchers started showing up at the water hole, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And she felt that I set it up. That was my takeaway. That I brought her down there, and it was a setup. Oh crud, here come the cops, versus, I thought we were just down here to talk about Summer. And you'll see a transition in her, like just lickety split.
Yeah.
Is so different than it used to be even 10 years ago because of, people can get on, this little device and say, he's lying, she's lying, he's this, that, and they do it about me too. You're right. It's just so out of control almost.
I've really never seen so much hate in my life until now.
I believe it.
Honestly.
I believe it. I believe it. Because I think everybody wants to help, but they don't know how to help. So when they hear indiscrepancies, okay, automatically that take, what is that? Oh man, don't get stung on me now. You'll be blaming me for a bee sting. But they don't know how to help, or they want to help. And then of course there's one discrepancy on YouTube or wherever, and next thing you know it just gets crazy. I mean, I've had people say, oh, you paid Hunter to talk to him. Seriously? Am I paying you? No.
I don't want your money.
And I wouldn't offer it. Okay.
I don't want nobody's money.
I'm not here
I just
for that.
want my daughter.
I'm here for
all I
that
want.
reason. That's why I'm here. Okay. That is why I'm here. I'm not interfering with the investigators. I'm letting them
I'm not neither. I'm going to let them do their job.
let them do their thing.
Do their job.
Let them do their thing.
That's all.
Okay. And you came down here on your own to walk me through this.
Yes, sir.
I credit you for that. I respect you for that. Okay. And somebody's going to find something wrong with it, though.
Of course they will.
I'm giving you a heads up. Okay.
No, I
By the way, I just want to say towards the money thing that Candice's birthday was a month ago, and she is a bona fide YouTuber now, and posted her Cash App on her page. Her daughter's still missing 3 years later. Woohoo!
I already know this.
All right. I'm just telling you. Okay.
That's how the world is today.
It is. Now, the other side of that, okay, is if there is a suspicious person or somebody like that now you mentioned, or Don, I can't remember in the first interview, Donna had mentioned that on the news, he mentioned that he thought that she was abducted. How did that conclusion come so quickly? Help me understand that.
Because she never wanders.
Okay.
She always stays right there by the house, right there by the swing.
Okay.
She'll go to grandma's, but she'll be right back to the house.
Okay.
She'll never leave the house. She'll never go out of my sight.
Okay. So what did you tell Don at work when you called
I
him?
just said she was missing. I can't find her. That's all I said.
Do you remember where he was that day? What job site he was on?
I believe he was in Jonesboro at the Meadows, I believe.
Okay, and he's hanging drywall?
No, he's finishing drywall.
Okay, so he's a finisher.
Yeah.
Okay, a taper.
Yep.
Got it. And do you help him?
Well, I tried to help him yesterday, but I just...
Yesterday when I called you, is
Yeah.
that where you were working?
Yeah,
You told me you were working, and you said you were going to go to church,
Yep.
and you went to church.
Yep, I
Okay,
sure did.
so you did all the things you...
Well, who else doesn't wander? A lot of kids go missing that don't wander. It seems like at least a couple that I've heard of in the last couple of years. I mean, what do you make of that? Anybody? I'm just asking because I'm genuinely curious. What is this? I mean, wouldn't it? I know why Dawn and Candice have the story because I don't think that they believe it either that she was kidnapped because Candice has kind of went on and just there possibly other things may have happened to her, but I I mean, I think the reason that they say that she was kidnapped is because it's plausible deniability, and they can't actually get in trouble for saying, well, I was high and she wandered off and got mauled by a bear or something, because you'll get in trouble for admitting something like that when your child goes missing. I mean, what they have done to me is completely distanced themselves from any repercussion or legal infraction by saying, look, somebody came right into our house. We're the victims here. They stole our daughter, and that's all there is to it. So you better, if you can find her, you better find her. But I mean, what is it about that? I mean, do you think that the reason that that's the story is so nobody gets in trouble? I mean,
what else would the story be? What other
she's very adamant that she didn't wander off. Okay. But I mean, that could have been a story. It could have been a possibility.
Sure. In the different buckets of what could be true, it just gives their, sense or their whatever about one of the buckets, but the buckets remain, right? I mean, she either wandered off, was abducted, or it was an inside job. I mean, what else is there?
Right.
We think that wandering off and being abducted are ridiculous, as Sherlock Holmes said, right? When you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. So if you take wandering and getting abducted off the table, the only thing left is an inside job, right? I mean, what else could there be? Yeah. Aliens came down and took her. I mean, she was raptured. I mean, what else? What happened to her?
It's funny that you say that, because Don has suggested, even if he was just giving me crap, he mentioned that possible alien abduction. I'm not kidding. He texted to me.
Well, he said I took her.
Wow.
He said I took her too, and then he said aliens possibly. Now, think what you want about that. But if he's serious, that's a problem. If he's joking, that's a problem. Just a problem. I mean,
it's an interesting fib, isn't it? I mean, even what you project into that lie. I mean, is that some I don't know, invader took her. Because an abuser is essentially someone who is an invader.
It's a good point. That's a great analogy, and it's, as an investigator, it no matter what the story is, it's their story is about the reason why she's missing. That, and in this case, it was that she was abducted. They're in essence taking off every other probability, like you were just talking about, Gary. They're taking it all off the table, and that's the problem that I have. That is just the fact that they have a story instead of,
right.
We have no idea what happened to her, and
exactly.
We're looking for. We're open to anyone that has any information, and let's do everything we can to get the word out, but when they say, well, it has to be that somebody came up on this property and they took her, they abducted her. And if that's the only story and only probability in their mind, then it's like shutting the door, because if that's the case, it's probably going to, more times than not in the investigation, we see it play out to where that's absolutely what didn't happen. And they know that's what didn't happen. So that's why they're so set on that's the story. Go chase that story, because that'll keep you busy for a long, long time, because it really didn't even happen. And so it'll keep you far away from looking at us. Go chase that elusive kidnapper, which is actually just a red herring.
Yeah, they're not acting like people that lost something. They're acting like people who already know where it is.
Correct.
Yeah, you don't look for what's not lost, right?
You told me you were going to do it, and I got it. Okay, so that all lined up. Okay, and now when you called him, what was his reaction?
He's like, "What, are you playing with me?" I was like, "No, I'm not playing." He's like, "Call 911," and that's what I did.
Okay.
That was all that was said.
What was Grandma doing?
Grandma was out hollering for
Okay.
as much as she could. She couldn't. She can't really get down. My driveway's horrible.
Right.
Horrible.
Right.
I don't know if you ever been out there. But
I went to your end. I didn't go up.
right, it's horrible out there. The driveway's nasty. Every time it rains, all the gravel goes into the creek.
Okay. Is Don home now?
No, he's actually at work.
Okay. Do you think you could show me where she was, where you were, and so we could?
This is the end of the video, but Steve, I know you got to get going here, and I want to ask you a question. What did you? I don't know if we've ever heard your take on this, but Don, in a fleeting, drunken, fighting moment with Candice one night, said that he has 7 alibis, and that Candice has none. She's going down. Did you ever hear that?
You know, I do remember hearing that. Yes. I don't remember what the context was, but I do remember hearing a clip of that.
I'll give you the context. They were on a live. It was extremely, it was out of control. Dawn was hammered. Candice, I think, was hammered. There seemed to be some sort of physical disputes going on. And Dawn then says, I have 7 alibis. Candice ain't got none. She's going down. And he said, and when he said that, he wasn't like chuckling or anything like that. I asked him about it many, many, many months later, and he said that he was just joking around.
Of course.
That's a hell of a joke.
Well, it's like Chris alluded to earlier with Candice. It's like you put that liquid courage in them and things loosen up pretty. By the way, Chris, I didn't know that was your secret to getting confessions.
Absolutely.
Whatever it was you brought into your people, you loosened them up. Good for you, man. But no, that was a great. I'm just kidding, by the way. But that was a great interview with Candice, and when I heard it, I thought, oh, Chris, go in now. Get that confession right now. But I understand the situation you were in, and you got a lot more information, which was kudos to you. But that, I think that what Don was saying is that I know what happened, and what he's saying is that I need an alibi, and I played the card so that I'm not going to go down. Candice is going to. He's not realizing they're linked together in this. They both have the guilty knowledge, but he's saying, by saying I have 7 alibis, what he's really saying is I need an alibi, and by the way, I've got 7 of them. She doesn't have any. She's guilty. She's got guilty knowledge. She's going down, but he's linked. He's linked to her, and it's a latent confession. What do we call it, Chris? A latent admission of guilt. So when they say things like that, I'm like, oh, there's a mic drop right there. We don't need to go any further. I mean, as far as focusing outside that scope, again, he narrowed it right there.
Right. And like I said, it was just, he says, he says a lot of things and he walks a lot of things back, which is all you can really do when you say something. So I was completely shocked. People on YouTube, all of us, we were, when we heard it, we were just like, wow, I can't believe it. I was surprised that the local news didn't play it. I mean, I was shocked. They did not a peep. And you're going, you gotta miss. I mean, and they cover this story. Fox News, when they first started covering this story, talked about Don and Candice's criminal history in the very maybe it was the second paragraph, right? Because whoever was writing it thought that it was important to bring it up, that they had these issues and things like that. And apparently there are people out there that think that it has nothing to do with anything, which is just it's asinine to think like that. But I was just so shocked at the coverage when that happened, I was like, dang, this should be like this should be in the paper tomorrow, nothing, right? I mean, Chris, if you were to hear somebody say that, wouldn't you be knocking on their door the next day going, hey, I saw you, saw your little interview last night. What do you mean? And I'm not saying that they didn't. It's possible that they did, but not the news didn't even show up, and they've been covering that story for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, you just put it in the bucket of, well, I can't wait till this all falls into place. And, then you can say, hey, can we talk about this? Can we talk about this? Right, Steve? Can we talk about this? Hey, but what about this? And I mean, we didn't have, obviously I do today, but, I was in the jail the other day talking to a guy. I can't mention the case, and I said, look, dude, I said, you're kind of toast. Okay, this just doesn't look right. And he leans over and he goes, did they get my phone? I'm like, man, we, back in the time, it's like what you're talking about. I mean, Don is like, 7 alibis, this and that. And Steve gave another great analogy of how that falls into place. But I mean, let's I think if we just keep this in basic fundamental, where I think investigators get lost, and we even see it now in the YouTube community, where there's just so much stuff that just gets thrown out there. And one of the things that we always want to refocus investigators on in the Cold Case Foundation is what's the baseline here? Where's the baseline? Where do we operate here? What did you see the very first moment you walked into that house, deputy? Well, I saw A, B, C, and D. And so we tell cold case investigators, go back and read that very first report of the observations of what that officer, go look at that body camera if you have it. What is that body camera telling you? Meaning, look at the walls, look at the environment, the situation, the circumstance. And then from there, you can build up into, staying out of all of these other you just waste of time places, and you just stay focused on what the fundamentals are. And this, with her that day, I think it was like I don't remember. I think it was like 3 weeks later after her disappearance. And when I showed up there, it was something like that. It's been so long that, to be honest with you, I don't recall exactly. I have to go look back on my notes.
Don't you guys think, though, that the police are probably giving them enough rope to hang themselves?
Well, I think they're
just.
Well, I think they had enough rope, a long time ago. To be honest with you, Gary, I think, they're right now. The last interview the lead detective gave was, he said, yeah, when leads come in, we run it down, but I go to my case file. And the moment I heard that, I mean, Steve, you know what that means. He's got a PhD, piled higher and deeper, of other life going on, i.e. crimes that are still happening in Hawkins County, and they're coming into his desk. I don't know if he's the only detective, but what Hawkins County needed to do, and still, in my opinion, needs to do, is cut the love here, send it up to TBI, let them run full time. They've got the resources, they've got the lab, they've got the people, and just cut it loose and let them run. Put your detective back into motion, let him work with that team up there, as because he's got the most knowledge. Keep him engaged. But my opinion, this case is cold. It's ice cold. Hey, it's freezer cold.
That's very sad to hear. I mean, I agree with you, Chris. The way you're laying it out is that they probably have had enough rope. But don't you think, though, that the issue is there's no body?
Well, but that's only a part issue, right? I mean, they were given a gift in Don's 3 investigations in Utah. That was a gift. Okay. Where, the authorities in Utah were investigating for all the SA. Well, that was the time to move. And they went, and the authorities in Utah went to him and spoke to him in jail. But that was the time to twist him and say, hey, we'll give you this if you give us that, whatever that means. Right? I mean, we've all been in that circumstance where, you're looking for a 5-year-old girl, and guess what? You've got a situation here that presents itself that says, oh, wow, look at this. We've got this over here. Well, let's focus on that to get that. And I think they missed that window of opportunity.
Yeah, I do too. I agree with you. That was a pure gift. And I think a lot of us thought, well, this is when it's going to happen. This is when they've got him in custody on these other charges. And I just thought it's going to happen right now, but it never did. And so I think that I agree also that they're probably a little overwhelmed, a small agency. I also agree the case is cold. It's there's other cases that are.
How could it not be, right? I mean,
how could it not be? There's nothing going on. There's just nothing there. So yeah, it's definitely cold. I think they need to regroup. Chris, great idea. Pass it up the chain. Either way, there has to be a fresh set of eyes on this case, and not necessarily the investigation, but how do we take all the information that's out here already and work this? How can we make this work in our favor? Because I think that there is already a lot there. I think it's intimidating probably for, I don't know if it's the investigator or who, but they don't have the body like Gary alluded to. I mentioned that, that's a problem. And maybe they're waiting. Maybe they think that it's, she's going to be found, but goodness gracious, if it's been 3 years and
if only there was a foundation that worked cold cases. Steve, I know you got to go, and I appreciate you being here. I think this is a perfect place to stop for us tonight. And Chris, thanks for jumping over. Dr. Gay, thank you for coming on as well.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Let's do
Yeah,
it again sometime.
with these guys too. That was a double,
awesome.
double treat there.
So I'll let you guys go, and Chris and Gary, and eventually Steve, you're gonna have to come on our podcast, The Witness Box. If you haven't checked the podcast, I'd love to have you on. We record, it's not live. We have a good time just talking and doing our thing. And the episode,
yeah, absolutely, I'd love to.
Really great. Well, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you all being here, and we'll talk soon.
Nice haircut.
All right. Take care.
Did you cut that with a corn dog? What the heck happened to you? Yeah. Stay up. Good night.
See you later.
I guess.
Good night.
Cut that with a corn dog.
Corn dog. Yeah. I always taking shots across the bow. Thank you, Dr. Gary.
You're very welcome. It was a lot of fun, and obviously an awful topic, but what I mean is it's always intellectually stimulating to get together a bunch of people. And it's funny. I'm waiting to see how high you need to, how high of a stack, how big of a royal flush you need of credentialed people before you stop getting picked on by people who like to do hit jobs to draw attention to their own programs.
Yeah, they got to use us.
I don't know what's next. I mean, you might, it's like you have to.
They use our programs, and maybe we can talk about eventually. We won't tonight, but we can talk about the different types of PhDs in the world, and I think that people would be very illuminated by that.
Very illuminating. Well, anyway, it's it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
So
okay,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Happy Memorial Day. Bye.
And that's right, Memorial Day weekend. You guys enjoy your night tonight. I appreciate you being here. That was quite the surprise. I thank you for Dr. Gary coming on, and then Chris and Steve coming over. Such an honor and privilege to have such brilliant people speak on these cases. And let me just say here, Gail, Thank you so much for gifting 20 memberships. That is beyond kind. And I just want to thank Nurse Sandy. I am going to mark it down. We're going to play it for him the very next time. I've made him aware of it. I did not expect the guest tonight, so please forgive me. And I didn't get my haircut by Erica Hartman. Thank you so much. And Gail again, as Sharon. I will pay to hear the experts. Yeah, I love that. I love that they take interest in this stuff. And Deception Detective's got a great channel. Go check him out. He just did a piece on my conversation with Donald, which happened. I can't remember how long ago. Half Pint, shout out Little House on the Prairie. And Deception Detective, thank you again. Thoughts on Summer possibly being trafficked or sold to pay off debts? Yeah, I think, look, anything is possible. It's just, you would think that there would be some sort of sign, or I don't know. It's a great question, though. Oh my God, I'm in love with this panel. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much for everything you do to keep us safe. Thank you so much. Gwen. So good to see you, Gwen. I'll be hearing from you here shortly as well. Thank you. And Mex Chica becoming a member. Thank you. I appreciate that. Love my lab family. We love you too, Gwen. Keep the magnifying glass on the family. Great show. We appreciate it. A whole year you've been stuck with me. Fun size. Got a birthday coming up too. And Nightwood, thank you so much. Such a great live. It really was. I'm late, but I'm definitely going to replay. Enjoy the replay. And I appreciate everybody being here. I really do. Thank you guys so much, and for just being here and supporting the lab. I got a couple podcasts. The Witness Box. You can catch it on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Google, and then usually the episodes don't get released right away here on YouTube. We're trying to drive traffic to those other channels, but about a week after we release, then it gets released. If you go to the lab under podcast, the Witness Box is there. I'll let you know if we do create our own channel. It's been discussed. So we'll have to Steve's channel. Let me see. I had it. What time is it? No, I don't think there's I think we've had enough. We'll do one tomorrow. How's that? I appreciate you. Thank you guys. Before I leave, make sure to subscribe to Steve Johnson's YouTube channel, The Interview Room. Had a great show. If by chance you haven't seen that show yet, go check them out as well. Dr. Gary's book, The New Evil, is available for sale on Amazon and any bookstore near you. I appreciate it. In the witness box. Make sure to check it out. I think you guys would like it a lot. Good night.